All right, so I'm starting with this news that I just saw this morning and I thought was quite exciting. This woman named Elisa Isage, followed by something in perhaps Cyrillic from some foreign country, uh, she won the Pwn2Own competition with a 0 day breaking out of a virtual machine on a Mac. And she developed her own exploit for this. But then, so she announced like 17 hours ago that she's the first woman ever to win the Pwn2Own. But the way the Pwn2Own works is you take over the machine with some secret 0 day exploit, and then they take you to some private room and you reveal the exploit, and then they check to make sure it's really a 0 day. And unbeknownst to her, somebody else found it and reported it in the meantime. So it's technically not a 0 day. So they sort of yanked her trophy back and said, well, she didn't exactly win. She was sort of disqualified on a technicality, but she's still gone where no woman has ever gone before. Apparently, she's the first independent female researcher to make it to this close to winning anyway. So it's a partial win, is how they described it from the 0 day initiative. Anyway, this is great. I'm really glad to see, another example breaking this barrier because, as I think some of you have noticed, hackers tend to be sexist and think women are stupid and treat them like sex objects and stuff. And there are so many examples of women doing awesome stuff. It's good to see counter examples being celebrated. So good for her. Anyway, then we're on to Liz with Proctorio again.
Yes, guess what? Proctorio sucks.
And water is wet.
Yeah.
Right.
Just in case.
We've covered this before, but it's still so widely in use that I feel an obligation to keep dunking on Proctorio until the world gets the message, because these programs are just awful. For anyone who doesn't know, Proctorio is a horrendous spyware application that's used to proctor student exams for remote courses, and it's just it's problematic through and through. But the aspect we're going to talk about today is that there, like so many facial recognition applications, this one is pretty racist. A student researcher found the has been reverse engineering the software and identifying the various components of it. And one discovery was that their facial recognition fails to correctly recognize black and brown faces more than 50% of the time. And it's also quite ableist too, because this application also one of its features is that it tracks eye movements, and not everyone can control their eye movements a lot of the time, and so it will falsely flag people as cheating for a variety of reasons that totally aren't cheating. And a good instructor is not going to use this at all. A slightly less adept instructor who's going to use it anyway is going to at least vet the results before just taking them as gospel. And a lot of instructors do not vet the results at all. They just go off based off of this trashware, whatever it says. And if it says the student's cheating, well, then by gosh, that student's cheating. So best not to do that. Again, it's racist, it's ableist, it's terrible software in general, like so much of this student spyware. So best to avoid.
Yeah, they've got some amazing pictures here of it taking a picture that contains a black person and a white person, and it will only find the white person even when they're like in the background, and just totally ignore the black person as not really a face, which is, I think, with Lenovo. Lenovo had a face recognition laptop, but if you're black, it will never recognize your face. So this is why all the major companies like Microsoft have pulled back from face recognition, and they've developed and stopped selling us. We've discovered that face recognition technology is really not ready for prime time.
Yeah, and I mean the pictures are it's egregious. I mean, you'd think that they would be embarrassed to ship a product like this that's this bad, but no. And I mean, this isn't just uh, lest anyone think this is just in use at fancy private schools. It is not. This is in use at public schools, not only at the college level either. And it's really just a terrible product, and you shouldn't use it at all.
Yeah, well, you know, something a senior administrator told me when I was a fairly new instructor and I was worried about cheating. He said, you know, if you're getting cheating, it shows your course is structured in an unwise way that has these
Right.
high value tests and this high amount of pressure. And I didn't want to hear it at that time, but I eventually came around to that point of view. You should, a better designed course wouldn't be this way. And you know,
Right.
the best tests with the highest reputation are not multiple choice tests. They're things like the OSCP, where you have to spend 24 or 48 hours hacking something and then write a report on what you did. So cheating is not really that much of an issue.
Right, but a lot of instructors, I think, are lazy and don't want to grade papers or practical application tests, so they resort to auto-graded multiple choice exams, and then think that they need to put in these ridiculous measures to prevent cheating because their courses are trash. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, that's why I used to be doing it that way and I got out of it. Now I like things like making students give a presentation in class. That's easy for me to grade and it's very good for the students. But you know, it's a thing you get. That's one thing about teaching is that experience matters. You just been in it longer, you sort of get over these old traditions.
I wish that was true. I wish that was true of everyone, but it unfortunately is not.
Yeah. Well, anyway, all right. So then Irvin's got Battle Sim, a Microsoft product, which I didn't.
From Microsoft, yes, they released this experimental research platform to simulate abstraction of networks and security concepts. I am very interested to try this out and see how we can leverage it. It looks like it runs in Python, and you can even run it on Jupyter notebooks, which to me was quite the.
And what is a Jupyter notebook? Is that
A
hard?
Jupyter notebook is basically an online Python thing where you can put code in it and it executes on the cloud.
Okay. And so it
Just in your
sounds like
browser.
it's got to have a whole bunch of containers. It sounds like it's simulating a whole network.
Yeah, it does. Along with using quite a number of other things like DeepQL and whatnot. I am very curious to try this out.
Yeah, I'd like to know what you make of it because it sounds like it's a whole network, and then you get to and bad guys you get to practice attacking it and see if they can catch you or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
That sounds like it is the whole blue team for you to have red team practice against.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Although they seem to only intend for it to be used for machine learning for an automated attack. But anyway,
I think it's something great to see.
it sounds like a handy way to make a competition.
Yep.
Pick one of these things and let people keep trying to hack it, that might be good or it might be super lame. It'd be fun to see how it works out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so right, Facebook lost 500 million records of data, and they're trying to say that's no real problem. So
Right. So Vice has this article about how Facebook lost a whole bunch of phone numbers. So essentially what happened is that when you would sign up for Facebook, it would read your contact list, upload the numbers to Facebook, and then it would, say, oh, well, I know, Bob Smith or June Duhardy, why don't you become friends? And that was the whole
that
point.
includes people who are not on Facebook then.
Yes.
Oh, that's rude.
Yes, it is quite rude. So yeah, it would look through your contacts, upload the phone numbers, and it was supposed to be a feature, and people kind of knew what was happening and just sort of rolled their eyes, whatever. And it turns out that what you can do is you can pretend to sign up for Facebook over and over again, and scrape the phone numbers from the database, to see what numbers are in there, and so that's exactly what hackers did. They grabbed all the numbers from the database through scraping, and some people complained. So I should start out by pointing out that this was known in 2017. Like, this is not a new thing that suddenly popped up, and Facebook was like, oh, oh no, we had an oversight. No, this was done for a while. Facebook did nothing about it. And then finally, there was this big breach, and everyone's phone numbers were taken. And Facebook was first like, well, most of this stuff is from like a long time ago. Well, I don't know about you, but I still have the same phone number now as I did 10 years ago. So the fact that this data is old doesn't really help anyone. But also, then they said, well, it was not that big of a deal because it's just phone numbers, who cares? And it's not a real hack because all they did was scrape. But the most audacious thing that they did, and I'll quote them here. So this is a quote. While we addressed the issue identified in 2019, and keep in mind that this was presented to them in 2017, so it took them 2 years. Anyway, I'll go on. It's always good for everyone to make sure their settings align with what they want to be sharing publicly. In this case, updating the how people find a contact you control could be helpful. We also recommend people do regular privacy checkups to make sure that their settings are in the right place, including who can see certain information on their profile, enabling two-factor authentications. In other words, it's your fault for having your data leaked. You should have been more careful with what we automatically send up to our platform. Shame on you.
Yeah, and they've many times opened up a new feature that automatically is turned on that you don't even know about that leaks your data out, and then try to blame you for not knowing that.
Exactly. So, it's just too big of a task to ask everyone to know all the data on every platform they've ever been to. It's ridiculous. But they tried anyway to blame the users for their data breach.
Yeah, well, we need some data privacy laws in America.
I read that what they did was there's this feature where it's like find your friends on Facebook, and they just made an address book that had like every phone number ever in it and did it that way, which is pretty sad if that's the case.
Well, I remember Google's competitor, Google Buzz, where they would just everyone you sent email to and call them your friend and automatically notify them about everything you did and turn it on without telling you. So you wake up in the morning and like your ex-boyfriend and your secret gay lover and the guy you buy weed from are all on the same group with your mom and your church, and you say, what the hell's going on here?
That's awesome.
Lawsuits over that one. And they said, gee, we thought if you sent email, that means they're your friend and you should let them know everything about you. What could go wrong with that?
That is so funny. Yeah, it's like a bunch of people who don't really, it's like a bunch of robots application for humans.
That's what Google is. They don't understand anything about actual human social life. They think everybody is basically a student at college, just part of a team or something. Anyway, this reminds me of the people that are like total anti-abortion fanatics. You should never get an abortion. I say, well, that sounds nice in principle, but you might not be aware that there are some people in trouble that have a real problem and regard this as the best solution to a real problem that you haven't thought about. Anyway, all right. And so now we're back to me, which I thought this is awesome. But Elon Musk tweeted this thing. So Neuralink, there's a company that put implants in a monkey's brain, and then the monkey plays Pong. And they have a video of it, and it's very nice and very effective. And this is not very revolutionary, really. This has been around for a while. I used to do this kind of work. I didn't do the animal work, but I did the computer modeling of the brain. And the point is, if you move your hand, they had the monkey play Pong with the joystick. The motion to move your hand is lighting up certain neurons in your brain. So they can just detect that signal directly from the brain, and then you can play Pong by thinking about moving your hand. And the monkey learns to do that, can play Pong quite well without the joystick. And of course, the point is, the fundamental researchers that are doing this say our point is to help disabled people control computers. And the first thing you could do, she said, somebody that's paralyzed could use their phone more quickly and more accurately for like texting than you could with your fingers, which is a good idea. But of course, the real thing he wants is to move into the science fiction future we've all seen, where you have a direct connection between your brain and a computer. And now you can do something like fly a fighter jet and do Google searches and cheat on your final exam and everything super faster than everybody. And I got an article from a company from a skeptic on this. The company called Neuralink that's done this with the monkey, and STAT, a medical website, has a skeptic's take on this, saying that, picking up motor neuron signals is pretty simple, but in fact, in tests, controlling it with imaginary movements is actually more work than doing real movements. for people who are not disabled. And picking up more complicated impulses is going to be hard. So this is not going to be like a Google search in your brain anytime soon, or being able to read telepathically what you're thinking. But I think it's interesting, useful technology. He also says people are going to be reluctant to have brain surgery for some unimportant issue. And I must say, the one thing that's amazed me, the standard from science fiction, back in the 60s, there were science fiction stories about wireheads based on a real research in monkeys, where you just stick an electrode in your pleasure center and then zap it, and it's like a drug. And they said people are just going to be zoning out like junkies with this thing, which is what happened to the monkeys. And I don't know why that never happened. That seems like that would totally work, and it would even be healthier than heroin anyway. So, but I think, there's the cyborg thing where you start sticking computers in your brain. That's really coming. And you can have the whole argument about whether it's the Borg or whether it's the exciting new wonderful future we all want to be in. It'll probably be both of those things, but it's coming. Anyway, then Liz has got the right to repair legislation.
Yes, again, another story about why, what kind of problems can arise when we have legislators, ill-informed legislators making decisions on important laws that involve technical aspects. This is a real problem, and it's only increasing in our society as we have more and more policy and law that's focused around computers and mechanical things and technology, because we've got we've got to get more people involved in the government and lawmaking that understand, have even a rudimentary understanding of the way these things work, because right now the scene's pretty bleak. I believe it was last week, the Colorado legislature shot down right to repair laws in the state because they didn't understand it, and B, the lobby against these things is very powerful, because especially, one of the companies that we've discussed before is farm equipment, John Deere, who's a farm equipment manufacturer, and the fact that they now put essentially DRM on their devices, like their $250,000 tractors that they sell and stuff like that. And it's a major problem because they do everything they can to prevent farmers from repairing their own equipment. But when you're on a remote rural farm, you can't always just load up the tractor and drive 500 miles to get to your nearest John Deere repair center. You got to harvest the corn or whatever. So, for eons, since the beginning of farming, it's been important for farmers to be able to fix their own stuff. But they're prevented by doing so by these companies and the legislation that enables them.
Yeah, this creates hackers, when you have these pointless administrative controls trying to stop you from doing something that is technically possible, like file sharing.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's too bad. Anyway, and then we got, right, I have been pwned. Urban's got that.
So this ties in with what Caitlin's article. Troy Hunt decided to add the phone numbers into Have I Been Pwned. So now not only can you search by email, you can also type in your phone number to see if you have been pwned.
By the Facebook breach, yeah.
Yes, by the Facebook breach, along with all the other breaches that they have so far.
Yeah, and I have been pwned has really become important. I mean, I was just talking yesterday in my CISSP class about Microsoft's old complexity rules to try to make sure your password is not on a list. And now you can there's an API to just ask, I have been pwned. Has this password been leaked, which is a much better test.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I had a really lame password for some unimportant activity on my phone, like Chipotle or something. And when I updated the app, it popped up and said, this password has been stolen. And I say, well, I'm not really surprised, but I am a little surprised that the iCloud automatically noticed that. So apparently iCloud is now querying some kind of online list of passwords.
Yeah, I was really glad when you stopped using modesty as your password, Sam.
Yeah, well, that one breached long ago. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, however, you stole all my passwords, and some of those are probably still the same. So that's why, I was talking with Liz one time about when I was thinking I was going to die before I got my COVID shot and writing a will and stuff. And she said, "What about your online properties?" And I said, "Well, Caitlin can totally get into them all." But anyway, all right. And so then I've got this is a win in administrative is, of course, this lawsuit finally ended with Oracle versus Google, where Google used Java in Android. And what they did was copy like 1% or 2% of Java's code to get the API right. And you really have to be allowed to clone an API, or you can't make products that are interoperable with other people's products. This is like everybody agreeing on the shape of a plug and the voltage of a plug you plug into the wall. If you don't all agree on things like that, then technology is really messed up. And so Google claimed that what they did was fair use of Java, and Oracle claimed it wasn't, and they have to pay $9 billion or something of royalties. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled for Google, saying, yes, you're allowed to copy code for the purpose of making your product interoperable with other products, which is pretty much what you have to do. And that's a really big thing. That's a really good improvement. If they had gone the other way, this would really mess up products being able to work with each other. So that's a good decision, I think. And I've been following it for years. Anyway, and then so apparently unions are just horrible. Elizabeth?
Well, depends on who you ask, but Amazon and other companies, Google, they really do not want to have a union, their workers unionized. So there are, according to this article, a category of enterprise known as union avoidance firms that these megacorps hire in order to deter, sabotage, do whatever they can to union bust against their employees that are trying to organize. I thought this was illegal.
That's what I was going to say.
So I'm not really sure how this is okay or how they get away with it, but apparently there's a whole business sector for this, which is pretty mind-boggling. But these companies essentially compile dossiers on the employees at the companies where they're trying to union bust, and it's
very illegal.
It is, and I mean it's pretty nuts because I mean some of the stuff that some of those things that they collect on these people is pretty egregious. They want to do whatever they can to find out how these people are motivated, what their how many family members they have. Like it gets really creepy to see whatever they can do to, if what are these people motivated by, and how can they entice or intimidate them into abandoning this foolish quest to organize for fair working conditions.
This sounds a lot like the Cambridge Analytica, the way they trick people into not voting.
Yeah, some of the some examples of these notes, like one woman was described as an impressionable follower who will do whatever friends do, and they're a single mother whose rent had increased so they can't afford news. I mean, I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions here. How they get away with this, and it's pretty terrifying too, considering I would think that these corporations would be pretty attractive hacking targets.
And apparently it worked. The news came out this morning that they voted against the union in Alabama. They now have counted enough votes that they know there is not going to be a union. So this union suppression stuff worked.
Yeah. And I don't know how this article literally mentions union avoidance consultants, and I just
Well, I can imagine that if you're careful to just stay just barely legal, it would be like tax avoidance. You
yeah,
figure out where the law is and you stay like just barely inside the lines.
and that's what they do. They manage to get around Department of Labor regulations by hiring people as independent contractors. I don't know how that is any better, but they're really good at finding loopholes. I'm assuring these companies have a phalanx of sleazy lawyers who will work for them to find these loopholes and enable them to continue doing what they do. So
Yeah, well, from what I've heard, there used to be union protections and they've gone down just like voting rights have gone down over the last decade or two. Yeah, well, all right. And Urban's got boiling liquid to cool your data center.
I found this to be awesome. I know this is not security news, but this.
Oh, that's security, physical security. This is physical security counts. Cooling your servers.
Yes, this is awesome. They have 3M has this liquid that you can put servers in. It doesn't short them. It's in the liquid itself is insular, but it's physical cooling. You don't need fans anymore. You just put your servers in there, and the heat will make the liquid turn into a vapor, and it has a system to recirculate that, cool it down, and start all over again.
That sounds great. I know this is why so many recipes have boiling, because if you boil something, it's always at a certain temperature. And it takes the maximum amount of heat for it to heat up. And that phase transition is far more effective at keeping a constant temperature than just a liquid cool bath.
Yeah, I want some of this liquid.
Well, but of course, I wonder, is the liquid like poisonous or destroying the ozone or something awful?
So I know a few of these liquids. One of the liquids it's not hard water. It's some sort of, it's dry water. Is that what you're looking at?
What is dry water?
It was invented by 3M very recently. I forget the exact chemical composition. It's not water, but it has properties similar to. It looks like water, but it doesn't get things wet. And of course, it's insular, so it's like, you can use it for cooling electronics and stuff like that. There's a lot of good uses for dry water, but it's still a fairly new product that's still very expensive.
Yeah, it sounds good. I just sort of wish I knew what the stuff was. They don't tell you what it is. Maybe it's proprietary or something.
Well, let me look this up. Really
Other
quick.
than dielectric, and it's made by 3M.
Yeah, there's definitely dry water. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sort of interested. I don't suppose
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I do know what you're talking about. I've seen this before.
something like liquid plastic or something, I'm guessing.
I mean,
Immersion cooling with 3M liquids at data centers. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, put a bunch of GPU cards in there and
Oh yeah.
do all your hash cracking and mining it to your heart's content.
Yeah, and we used to do this in my days in cryogenics. This is how you cool things to like 2 degrees. You put them in boiling liquid helium. I mean, it's, but that of course is completely harmless. And I wonder what this junk is. Anyway.
Yeah, like I said, I'm almost completely sure it's dry water. They use it. Yeah. They actually use it for fire suppression.
Yeah.
In server rooms already, because it won't endanger the electronics, but it will put out the fires.
Yeah, it sounds great as long as it doesn't do something horrible like poison the people.
Nope.
Yep. All right, and then we got a new kind of battery. Caitlin's got.
I think are we doing the battery or the muons?
Did we skip the muons? I skipped the muons somehow. Let's do the muons.
Okay. Yeah, let's do some muons. Let's see if I can pull it up here. So there's an article by the BBC talking about muons. And for people who are like, what's a muon? A muon is a type of lepton, meaning it's a fundamental particle, sort of like, it's actually very similar to an electron.
Right.
But unlike an electron, it is much heavier. So it's much more massive. And here's what they found. and it's kind of far down the article, but the scientists found that the muons wobbled faster than expected.
Yep.
And this may not sound like a big deal. However, there's I think what is it, sigma level 5. So there's like a 1 in 3.5 million chance that this was a coincidence, meaning that there is a good possibility, not confirmed, but a good possibility that there is a new law of nature, or a new force of nature, I should say, that we previously did not know about.
Yeah.
So that is awesome. And that will lead to a lot of new good technologies, if that is true.
Yes, like more powerful bombs or something. But
more powerful bombs. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, when we discovered the weak and strong nuclear forces, we sure enough invented nuclear weapons and nuclear power.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a good one. And I guess you better go on with the batteries. That's our last story. Somehow we skipped you last time.
Oh, okay. And speaking of new technologies, there's a new type of battery coming out that currently is about 60% the capacity of lithium ion, but charges about 10 times faster. And if I can find it's some sort of oops, press the wrong button.
Polymer, I know that.
No, it's a, oh, if I can find it. Get the name of it. It's in this article somewhere. Anyway, no, but yeah, so this
Organometallic polymer.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is actually big news. So in the computer world, we're used to advancements like every year pretty much. Like every 2 years, of course, things get like twice as fast, and we get faster hard drives and bigger hard drives and faster computers. But the fundamental components like capacitors, like batteries, they rarely change over time. And when they do, it sparks a revolution in the field. The last big revolution that I can think of were blue LEDs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those that now our entire lighting everywhere is just LEDs everywhere, just because someone invented a blue LED, okay? And so this idea of a new battery is, once again, one of those fundamental components in technology that can be applied very liberally. And if what I'm reading in this article is correct, it seems like a good use for this type of battery would be in cars. It doesn't seem to have the same amount of storage yet as lithium ion, but if size isn't an issue, like you have a lot of space like a car, but you got to charge it really quickly, this could be game changing.
Yes. And this idea has been around for decades. I remember reading about this in the 70s. The idea is you should have a capacitor instead of a battery, where instead of having a chemical reaction go on to store the charge, you just have a lot of surface area. So something like a really thin aluminum foil, only a couple atoms thick, that you crumple up would be the perfect battery that can store an amazing amount of charge and charge really fast. And that sounds like essentially what they've done here. They've made a very thin layer of metal on a very thin layer of plastic, essentially.
Well, no, I mean, capacitors,
surface area.
Yeah, no, capacitors are actually different from batteries in a very fundamental way. So the reason why you prefer batteries for storage of energy over capacitors is because, not because of the amount of energy that they can store, but because a battery will release most of its energy at the same voltage or similar voltage until the very end, and it'll drop off.
Well, yeah, you're right about that too. Yeah. You're right. And so maybe this has that feature too. That's right. But the fact that it does that, the same actually as a boiling liquid, because it's essentially a phase change at a constant. Right. And so, but if you want it to charge fast, that's kind of contradicting having that phase change. So anyway, but this is, it's certainly exciting new technology.
Absolutely. And hopefully this will get pushed down the line. It'll be at least 10 years, until we see if this goes anywhere, but hopefully it does. So
yeah. Well, that's great. All right. And so let's see, it's Friday. I guess we'll be back Monday. Farewell.